And now, I'm going to have the great times continue. Michael Jones, who's the CEO of Science, is going to come up, and we're going to have a fireside chat. I'm just going to ask him. He's actually in the middle of an ICO. I actually, after my amazing experience with Idea Lab, whenever I go to a new city, I try and meet the best accelerator or incubator in that city. I have personally visited more incubators and accelerators than anybody I've met. I did a TED Talk on corporate accelerators a few years ago, and it's exciting for me to talk to Michael because of all of the incubators and accelerators I've ever been to. I really believe that Science is one of the very best. What Michael is doing there is amazing, and so it's great to be able to sit there. And now, not surprisingly, Michael's in the middle of an ICO. So why don't we start, Michael? You can just start talking about. Tell the folks what Science is for those who don't know.
Sure. So I'm Mike Jones. You guys met my partner Greg. I think he was on the last panel. But Science is a 6-year-old organization. It was born out of my idea and a handful of partners where we had all operated and built and sold companies. We had run big companies and small companies, and we felt that entrepreneurship could be changed through a group of people that could come together and work hand in hand with these very early stage founders. So over the past 6 years, we attempted to build roughly 120 different companies with roughly 120 different founders. And about half of those ideas and those teams actually became something. And one of those things became Dollar Shave Club. But there were many others that became good, successful, long-term companies that quite a few we've actually sold. And what's special about the environment there is we can look at a sector, like originally we looked at commerce, and we can just immerse ourselves in the sector. So we can start building and we can start investing and working with entrepreneurs. And about 4 years ago, we also saw what you saw within the kind of cryptocurrency world. We started a mining operation, a Coinbase competitor, a variety of different operational companies, and then we just hated the legislation and the kind of risky landscape that it looked like, and so we ended up just investing in Bitcoin. And we paused our operational efforts, and about 9 months ago, we rewound them up, submerged the organization into the community, and ended up structuring our own Reg D ICO.
So can you talk about your process? So when was it that you decided to do the ICO? Like what happened? You said, you know what, we got to do an ICO.
So we were all active traders, and right around Christmas time is when Ethereum started moving again, and so we all got excited again. I think by February we saw what was happening with ICOs, and so the best way that I learn is I either build or I put money into it. And so in this case, I said, well, we've got to learn, so let's start putting money into it. And so in February, March, April, we started investing in a whole series of ICOs. And in doing that, we set up something that venture capitalists rarely have, which is a trade desk. So we set up a trade desk, we set up quant traders, we set up individuals that were analyzing different ICOs, and we started buying and selling these tokens and just learning what it all meant. And in doing that, we started also then meeting the founders of these companies and talking to them. And the further we got into it, we felt like, gosh, we might be seeing something special. And we thought the only way that we can really learn to do this is to have a bespoke vehicle that's dedicated to the funding and development of companies in the space. And we thought the best way to possibly learn and do it was to do it through the vehicle upon which everyone was so excited, which was an ICO.
And so kind of what were the first, okay, now you're going to do an ICO, now what?
Right, so, I think I went into my partner's office, Greg, who's an attorney, and said, we're doing an ICO now.
It helps. Doesn't it help a lot in this space to have a partner who's an attorney?
Well, it probably helps me stay out of jail.
Exactly. Well, that's a good thing.
Slow everything I wanted to do down a bit, but it's become a beautiful partnership because obviously we're at a very unique point where we're on the edge of legal threshold, financial threshold, and company threshold. And so what's nice is we have an organization that's very well prepared to take on the challenge because we have guys that have taken companies public. We obviously have in-house counsel. We have incredible product and strategists, et cetera. So the partnership works really nicely. And we said if we were going to do it, we all have way too much to lose to do it the wrong way. So let's do it the absolute right way possible. And through looking at blockchain capital, and at this point the Argonne Group, we started looking at the Reg D offering as the way that we wanted to do our ICO, which would then be the second regulation ICO, and I think the biggest one that's happened so far.
And so, obviously it's a long path. Can you talk about kind of what the going down this path has been like, and particularly kind of what's happened along that path? That obviously, when you start, you never. There are a lot of things the unknowns, right?
Yeah. Well, unknowns. I think one challenge right now is that the overall investment landscape for these things is changing almost every day, and it obviously is highly correlated with the price of Bitcoin. So ICOs are up or down really based on the velocity of Bitcoin and the way the market kind of sees Bitcoin at the moment. So you have this like super fast changing landscape. The second thing is, and I heard them mention on the previous panel, which is that generally this community is built on anonymity and super fast transfer of money through these tokens, which really doesn't spell well for anything that requires any sort of registration or proof of net worth. So the second thing we learned was that the securitized ICO market is very, very early. And the third thing is we spent a lot of time with very traditional LPs thinking that they were going to see the benefits of owning a token versus equity within, for instance, our case, a fund, which we can go into elaborately why it's actually really, really beneficial. And what we found is that they weren't even ready to even accept that Bitcoin was a thing yet at all. And so the institutional investors that we all believe will come and support the concept of securitized ICOs, they're really not even like in the field yet. They're on the sidelines. They're looking at guys like us and teams to basically put capital in the markets, but they're still just not sure and making sure they even want to own Bitcoin before they start purchasing securitized tokens.
And so, I mean, you've been going down this journey a little bit now. Has there been any movement among the institutional shareholders, just in the time that you're seeing?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, I think when we started ICO, which was maybe publicly talking about it 3 months ago, I would talk to people around our kind of LP base, and they would say, Mike, we're so glad you're investing in this. Please don't come talk to my operational committee about it at all. I don't want anyone in my organization to know that you're doing this, but I'm really happy you're exploring this, right? But meanwhile,
at any of your investors at that point, obviously I use the term "seen the light." And I know you've seen it.
I don't think they've seen the light because I don't think that they're wired to see light. I think they're wired to see returns, and seeing the light would infuse some sort of religious moment in a space, and I think they are wired not to do that, and that is super good for them, and they should stay in that level. But what I would say is that 2 days ago, I ended up in San Francisco for a full meeting with all the investment committee of like a $30 billion endowment. And they're like, we think we're ready, and we want you to come talk to us, right? And so a lot happened in 3 months, right? Because 3 months prior to that, they were like, we don't want to admit we know you, but please whisper and tell us what you're learning, right? So it is changing fast.
Have you had a chance to talk to Fidelity?
I have not talked to Fidelity.
Yeah, because it's incredible. Fidelity started mining more than 2 years ago, right? And they've got a team of 25 people now, full time, on crypto. They're not exposing it to their, to the investor base, that invest in. But obviously, there's a lot of wealth in that family and other family wealth that they're investing. And I think they're at the forefront, and so other people are just going to follow them. And so, talk about kind of where your ICO is now and kind of your thoughts on then, kind of post ICO.
So, I mean, our ICO is, active. We have it active for another 10 or 15 days. And then it'll close up, and then we'll start our standard messaging process around the value of our equities, et cetera, whatever we're holding inside that vehicle. So that's great. I mean, post-ICO, like we already have a portfolio of companies in the building, building on blockchain. And I think about blockchain in a few stacks. And generally, when people ask me, like, what's Bitcoin blockchain, they think of it as one thing. And I think that the first thing to do with anybody learning about this space is similar to saying, like, I work on the internet. That's a big thing. There's a lot of things in the internet, and that's very true in this space too, right? So my general framework is that there's this concept of blockchain distributed technology, and that's like a technical framework upon which you can write applications. And honestly, that technical framework has been around for a very long time. Like, it's not new. Like, there's examples of this going back to like very first computers on distributed ledgers. So this is a technical framework which is in vogue today, right? That's the first thing, is you have this technology framework. The second piece is you have applications that can be built on this technology framework. These are these so-called utility tokens where somebody builds something and they sell it, right? So that's this application that can live on this framework. And then the third piece is like the token economy, which is almost like, as we were talking about here, a new type of security, a new type of pre-sale offering, which is a way that you could finance or create the exchange of these objects in this network, right? And so I think you have to break it up, and we break it up. So there's things I look at where I'm like, oh, this is a great new form of technology that you could roll out that could do things that we couldn't do previously. Oh, this is a new application that you could build onto this technology. And oh, this is new security we could bring to market. And they're three vastly different things. So when you're looking at getting involved in the space, you really have to pick where you are. And the fact is, like, ICOs or ICOs could go away. It doesn't change the fact that the concept of a distributed ledger is really neat. In a world where we have tons of highly fast connected computers at blazing fast internet speeds, suddenly distributed computing is a really, really cool thing, right? So even if the ICO market does or doesn't sustain, the technical framework of blockchain is really compelling. And as an architect of technology, if you're building that kind of stuff, you should certainly consider it.
Have you mentioned the token economies. Have you spent much time or any of your companies on kind of token economics, right? And how all that works, and that's something that, is just now.
Yeah, we have spent a ton of time. Nobody's good at it. I mean, one thing that's hard here, right, is you build a thesis around an economy, and then you lock it into a token, and you put it into this autonomously operating network, and then you pray to God that your logic was right. Because in theory, I was talking to someone yesterday that was like, well, gosh, if they run out of that token, can't they just issue more? It's like, no, that's the point. And they're like, well, what if they're wrong? I'm like, yeah, it could be really bad, actually, right? And I would say that even most of the entrepreneurs that we talk with who write these fabulous white papers and are so enamored with their concepts, I'm like, imagine 50 million people use your product and your token. Like, what does it look like now, right? And they're like, well, we think it'll work, right? And so the problem is, like, there has not been a melding of the minds of, like, economists and game theorists to spend time with architects, right? So what happens, right, is some master architect or group of architects architects blockchain and Bitcoin. The world does what it does. Suddenly, ICOs become a really fast way to make money, and so all these people jump into it. But I would argue that most of them have not architected what this actually looks like, and they might be rewarded with a really fast-paced ICO. But that really doesn't mean that that company and/or economy will work at scale. And there's almost very few people in the world that I feel like we could even turn to validate that, because it's very hard thinking that a lot of people aren't doing.
Yeah, it is. So I mean, I've been trying to do some thinking and going down the token economics rabbit hole. And the way that I'm thinking of it is you have governance, you have game theory, and in the middle is token economics. And and I was talking to different people, and then I met this guy, Tom Bollock, who's with a company called Mad Networks. And he started talking about token economics and totally blew my mind. Like, first thing he totally blew my mind. Second thing he said totally blew my mind. I'm like, okay, hold on a minute, back up. Where did, how do you know all this about token economics? And he said, oh, it was one of the founding 8 guys of Zynga, and, created token economies for Mafia Wars and token economies for all these other games.
Yeah.
And, he was talking about it in a way that nobody else that I had talked to before had talked to it. And so I got so excited. I held a conference call with him and a few other guys, and I held a meetup with him on Monday, just him. I started the New York Token Economic Meetup. So it's a video on it if you can see if you're into it and see. The other thing that I mentioned was governance. So because we've seen that governance is, in my view, it's the biggest risk to anything that's decentralized. So what are you doing on the government? How are you thinking about governance?
Well, so I mean, we think a lot about governance, but I also think that there's this misnomer, which is that the world is like tripping over themselves over smart contracts. But the reality is, like, first off, is the concept of calling it a smart contract would imply that somehow it's an enforceable object in our current legal system, right? Smart contracts are not enforceable. They are not contracts, right? They're very elaborate and honestly highly restrictive if-then statements that you can stack inside of an object that can, in essence, act on itself without a human conferring on it, right? Which is both really good and also kind of terrifying, right? So, so we do think about governance, but I think that there's this bridge between like autonomous technology systems, which is kind of what we're creating. These like, AI is the wrong word because it's not actually AI, but these like autonomous systems that we put into motion, right, that are now existing, but then what have real world potential financial repercussions, but no human connectivity if there is or isn't a breach in those smart contracts, right, or the smart language. So I think governance is a big question, but my concern right now is there's no one that's figuring out how to make it all enforceable. Right? There's certain things that
the algorithm's enforceable, right? That's what...
Well, it executes.
Yes.
The algorithm executes.
Right.
Yes.
It executes the governance.
It executes the governance. That sounds super scary to me. Like, I don't know. Like, I'd like to phone somebody up if my bank account's wiped out because an algorithm executed a smart contract, like, just happened, right? Like, there are certain things that, like, yes, everyone in the religious sense is like, decentralize everything. I'm like, I don't know. Like, sometimes I like a human that I can, like, phone up and solve a problem. Like, I trust computers and all, and I'm sure I'm going to be getting into some Uber that's going to fly over Los Angeles soon with a drone pilot. But, there's sometimes where, like, decentralize everything isn't everything. Right.
Yeah, look, what you put on the blockchain, right? Like, I have no doubt that, my second marriage, if I have one, will be on the blockchain, right? And then we won't have to deal with lawyers, no offense, right?
Yeah.
But, we'll just, okay, you want to get divorced, hit a button, and there'll be a smart contract.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'll still lose 90% of my money, but at least I won't have to pay a lawyer
Yeah.
to do it, right?
You'll just be surprised when some hackers like, I modified your marital contract and you're no longer married, sorry.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we'll end on that.
No problem.
So this was awesome.
Thanks everybody.